Lots of news coming through from the US, and also another thing that weighed quite heavily on the markets. We had Walmart announcing more holiday price cuts, and that's usually quite a bad omen for retail margins, and especially we've got the holiday season coming up, and it is all about the December retail sales. On the other end, we had that Fed Beige Book also released.
Yeah, the Fed Beige Book was quite interesting because it was indicating recovery in some sectors of the economy. So it's basically a snapshot of the big urban areas in the country and how they're doing it. I beg your pardon, and how their regions are faring relative to each other and relative to the last report. And there are interesting signs that there is improvement. There are interesting signs inside of commercial real estate, perhaps being under pressure a little bit. But you're right, that Walmart announcement kind of smacks that the consumer is still, on their knees and still looking for a bargain. And interestingly, these bargain type offerings have worked. Take for instance the FHA and their, first time home buyer credit. That's working, although admittedly not at, it smacks of kind of the past kind of lending type practices that took place. And then I think the interesting one which worked very well was the cash for clunkers. So I wouldn't necessarily get too anxious about it. Perhaps it's Walmart just looking to capitalize on a weak consumer and say, okay, well, we can drive sales here, because all these efficiencies that have been built in over the last 12, 18 months are going to start to follow through when companies can show to the markets that they can beat on the top line. So who knows, maybe this is just their thinking, kind of companies are missing on the top line, but because all these enormous efficiencies have been built up, and unfortunately that means a lot of cuts in spend, a lot of cuts, particularly in the job space, companies are beating on the bottom line, which indicates to me anyhow that they're much more efficient.
What about the banking sector? Of course, we had Wells Fargo beating expectations, but losses from bad loans reached $5.1 billion. And of course, we had that well-known banking analyst also downgrading his rating on Wells Fargo. And then we saw losses coming through on the whole financial sector as a result.
I guess it depends who you are. If you've got some well-known economists such as Nouriel Roubini, who still reckons the banks are all a bunch of zombie banks. I mean, Dick Bove has been around for, I think, the better part of 30 years or so. And he interestingly, is some stocks, he said, have run really hard and perhaps are at levels that maybe only justify 2010 earnings. So I think what he's indicating is that stocks have moved in a forward direction from kind of the Armageddon looking over the cliff type trade. Take for instance Citi, below $1, and now we're comfortably northwards of 3. In fact, I think we're over 4. So not that I pay much attention to the Citi price, but you see a four times move in the share price, and that's mostly based on the fact that people are saying, well, hang on, there might be further write-downs to come, but we're probably at the end of the cycle.
Well, earlier you mentioned the US consumer still very much on its knees, and it's no different here in South Africa. I mean, those retail sales for August contracting by 7%. Today is D-Day, though, for the MPC decision, and of course it's the final decision for Reserve Bank Governor Tito Mbowenis.
Yeah, just before you came here, there was a graphic up on the wall here of Gill Marcus standing next to Tito Mbowenis. I was very happy to be in their company. I think, it's a great appointment, it must be said, Gill Marcus. I know we're going to discuss it a little bit later, but I think on balance the consensus is, there we go, they're our friends, yeah. I think on balance the consensus is no change, and I think it's wise, because you're probably going to see some cost pressures coming through a little bit later. But you have to admit, at the end of Tito Mbowenis' tenure, he might not have pleased everybody, but he did a great job.
Well, what do you think the big mistakes that were made by Tito Mbowenis? I mean, some of the economists that I speak to say that he was rather reactive than proactive, that he could have done a whole lot more, a whole lot sooner, and just keeping in mind that some of the interest rate cuts just came a little too late.
I think everyone reacts to data. I think that's the way it works. I saw a fascinating graph yesterday from, I think, a Morgan Stanley presentation in which they showed analysts' predictions of earnings. So it went all the way from 2002 all the way through to 2011. And what was dramatic is that in 2007, people were predicting S&P earnings for 2009 to be somewhere around $110. which would have explained why at the end of 2007 in October we reached those highs of 1,555 on the S&P. Now if you go and look at the same earnings today, I mean they've fallen dramatically. They're at $60. So it doesn't matter who you are, you react to the news and the data in front of you. So you can point fingers, but I think the benefit of hindsight, that yes, sorry.
So although the inflation outlook in South Africa is changing quite dramatically, we've got oil prices rising. Of course, Eskom has also been thrown in that bag as well. But on the other end, some investors and analysts say that we'll probably not see another interest rate cut. And if we do, it'll probably be left for Gill Marcus. How do you think that is going to play out? I mean, what do you think is going to happen today?
Look, I'm no economist. I probably think he's going to stay pat and kind of it's going to be some sort of farewell speech. He is really colourful, and Gill Marcus got a lot to live up to just in terms of the presentation and her colourfulness. I remember saying I think maybe she could do one and done at her first meeting, an early Christmas present for us at the next MPC meeting. But I don't think the conditions are conducive now.
But just looking back at Tito Mbowenis' reign over the Reserve Bank.
Good job. If you had to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down and a mark out of 10, I would say 8 out of 10 and a thumbs up.
And do you think, even though he was quite mysterious about most of the interest rates decisions and sometimes really shocking the market, I mean, after the latest interest rate cuts, most analysts and economists go, well, I'm definitely not going to give you a forecast because I'll always get it wrong.
Yeah, I think on balance, if you go back and have a look at what economists said before the meetings, there's just a couple of instances where they got it completely wrong. But, on balance, as long as you get it right 6 out of 10 times, you're probably doing a very good job.